In October 1830, Kirtland, Ohio became the epicenter of an explosive religious movement. Within weeks, a handful of missionaries had baptized over 200 people, and that number rapidly swelled to 1,000. That kind of sudden expansion in a frontier town creates immediate panic. Local opposition quickly organized, leading to targeted persecution and a wave of false arrests aimed directly at the movement's leaders. One of those leaders was Parley P Pratt. He had stopped for the night at the remote home of a man named Simeon Carter. Right in the middle of a sermon, an officer burst through the door with a frivolous warrant to haul Pratt away. As the officer grabbed him, Pratt made a highly specific physical choice. He intentionally let his copy of the Book of Mormon slip from his hands, leaving it behind on Carter's floorboards. The Book of Mormon is the foundational sacred text of this new religious movement. The arrest served as a tactical strike. Local officials weaponized the legal system to separate a key frontier leader from his followers and silence him permanently. Pratt was forced on a 2-mile march down a dark, muddy road. He arrived late in the evening to a midnight trial already stacked with false witnesses. The magistrate, a man named Byington, openly mocked the entire proceeding. He bragged to the room that he intended to throw Pratt in prison for the sole purpose of testing the powers of his so-called apostleship. An apostle is a high-ranking ecclesiastical leader within their church hierarchy. Pratt quickly identified the rigged nature of the proceedings. He offered no legal defense. Instead, he met their taunts and demands for a cash settlement with absolute contemptuous silence. The trial dragged on until near midnight, exhausting the court's patience. Pratt then escalated his defiance. He turned to his companion and loudly sang a joyful hymn, "Oh, how happy are they," echoing through the hostile room. Enraged, the court pressed him again for money. Pratt finally spoke, offering a single settlement. If the judge and the false witnesses would kneel on the floor and repent of their forgery, he would pray for God to forgive them. By refusing to act like a terrified victim, Pratt stripped the corrupt court of its psychological leverage. He turned a legal trap into a standoff where the judge could issue threats but couldn't force compliance. The frustrated court finally adjourned. Pratt was locked in a public house overnight, and the next morning an officer named Peabody arrived to transport him to a distant prison. As they waited in the inn, Pratt's traveling companions walked past. He spoke to them in an undertone, instructing them to pursue their journey without him. He was deliberately isolating himself to execute his own exit strategy. Stepping into the public square, Pratt turned to the officer and asked a highly unusual question. "Mr. Peabody, are you good at a race?" Peabody laughed it off. He admitted he couldn't run, but bragged that his massive, highly trained bulldog had been assisting him for years and would take down any man on his command. Pratt politely summarized their time together, formally thanked the stunned officer for free lodging and breakfast, and then simply turned his back and walked away. Extreme composure operates as a psychological weapon. When someone acts completely unbothered in a high-stakes scenario, it creates severe cognitive dissonance. It momentarily paralyzes an opponent who expects fear and submission. Pratt accelerated from a deliberate walk to a full sprint. He vaulted a fence and made his way through a field, gaining 200 yards before the bewildered officer could process what was happening. Peabody finally snapped out of his shock. He started shouting, unleashing his massive bulldog to hunt his prisoner down. The physical threat escalated instantly. The giant dog rapidly closed the distance with absolute fury, snapping at Pratt's heels just steps before the forest line. Behind the dog, Peabody was reinforcing the attack using specific mechanics. He was running, clapping his hands, shouting "Stew Boy," a common frontier command used to incite working dogs, and pointing his finger directly at Pratt. This shows a vulnerability in animal conditioning. In a high-speed chase, an attack dog operates not on moral allegiance, but on directional cues, pointing and shouting. Pratt realized he couldn't outrun the animal, but if he duplicated the commander's signals, he could redirect its trajectory. Quick as lightning, Pratt executed the override. He violently clapped his hands, pointed his finger to the dark forest ahead, and perfectly mimicked Peabody's shouting. Pratt survived by reverse engineering his enemy's momentum. He duplicated the officer's commands, turning the dog's trained aggression into a tool for his escape. The hack worked flawlessly. Urged on by both the officer and the target, the confused dog doubled its speed, sprinting past Pratt and disappearing straight into the woods, leaving Peabody entirely defeated. Pratt vanished into the forest, but to understand the historical impact of this escape, we have to look at the physical object he deliberately dropped back in Simeon Carter's cabin. Carter picked up the abandoned book and read it with deep attention. The text moved him so profoundly that he travels 50 miles from his remote cabin straight back to Kirtland. There, Carter was baptized into the very church Pratt had been forced to leave. He was immediately ordained an elder, an official priesthood office tasked with ministering and preaching, and began converting others himself. The corrupt court spent all its energy trying to permanently eliminate one frontier leader. Instead, they inadvertently engineered the creation of another, proving that sometimes the most brilliant tactical retreats are the ones that leave something vital behind.